not live streams, but I'll do like some edited videos where I show how I do dishes and whatnot. And I thought, why not do a live stream format where I show how I unload the dishwasher? So I made baba ganoush and hummus last night, but I was so tired because I kind of pushed myself to stay up. And yes, I still have the braided hairstyle in, which is what's cool about this style is you can lay flat on your head and it just kind of allows you to sleep with this hairstyle in. So anyway, we're going to finish unloading the dishwasher and then reload it again. That's the fun part. So I just take everything over here, put it in this away. I am noticing that I'm going to have to rewash this one thing that had a smoothie in it because it didn't get all the residue out. So I don't have bottle brushes. I just use washcloths for everything to clean it. I find that's much easier. And if the dishwasher doesn't fully dry something as it's coming out, sometimes I will let certain things sit on a washcloth or a towel to like finish draining. But sometimes it's just easier to get a washcloth and pat it dry. And the thing that I like about a dishwasher, and some people are like, but you could do dishes by hand. But the cool thing about a dishwasher is it kind of sanitizes everything, gets it nice and clean. But the drawback of a dishwasher is you definitely do need to clean things yourself. And I just want to say, once you get around to doing chores and like cleaning your own space, it's very beneficial in a lot of ways. It makes you feel good. And it just gives you like a sense of calmness. And I think, yeah, there's a lot to be said for just like keeping up on chores. Chores are fun in a way. Like I dread them when I have to do them. But there's actually a lot of peace that comes from just putting away things, cleaning things. It can be very therapeutic. And, I guess some people just feel like, oh gosh, I need to hire someone to clean my house and blah, blah, blah. And I used to feel like, yeah, would that be easier? But I kind of thought, no, because here's the thing. You're going to have to pay somebody every time to clean the house. Are they going to do it the way that you like? I don't know. I just feel like if you establish certain cleaning routines, then you can clean your own space, And you don't have to be a minimalist to have a clean house. Like some people are like, but you need to get rid of a lot of objects so it's easier to clean your house. But there's still going to be dust and whatnot in your house. And I don't see the point. Like, I'm trying to understand like the whole appeal of minimalism, but I just feel like a lot of minimalist houses look really sad and boring to me. And I feel like it's not sustainable. And a lot of the brands that minimalists recommend and things are really expensive things, whereas you could just go, like if you're a regular person, you could go to Walmart and buy furniture that's in your budget. And yes, I am a budget-friendly gal. I'm always going to be that way. Even if I was a millionaire, I would still think budget-wise because I'm not going to spend like $20,000 on a sofa. Like I remember thinking, oh, like $1,000 was a lot of money for a sofa. But my friend was like, oh no, we spent like $20,000 on the sofa. And it was just because it was some sort of brand. And I'm like, you sit on the thing. It gets full of dust mites. Any sofa does. How in 10 years time, how is that $20,000 sofa? Like that's a year in college. That's a year of rent. I just can't see, like, even if you do have money to spend, why? Like, there's just some things I just, no. Because I feel like all it is people are like, oh, I'm buying this thing that has like a certain brand recognition type thing. And I don't buy into it. Like, I don't really care, like, if you bought some designer whatnot thing. Designer sofa, designer car, designer life. Honestly, it doesn't impress me. Like, I don't really care. Because people used to tell me things and I'd be like, okay. That's great. So, like, just do what's in your budget. You don't need to become a minimalist to clean your house. I mean, don't be a hoarder. Get rid of things you're not using. But, like, if you think you're going to wear your clothes again someday, don't donate them all. Because not everything you donate is going to be used. Especially, like, if it's books. If the books are old and yellow and, like, popular books that everybody read back in the day, everybody's going to be donating those same books, okay? Some people are going to have ones that are in better shape than yours. Why do you think, like, I think people think like they feel good. Like some of it gets recycled, yes, but not all of it gets recycled. And then a lot of books end up being donated, get thrown away. And then you see people the next day digging through a bin, like to get the things, or just like even at the Goodwill, like people, they don't really bring their donations during hours. Like you're not supposed to leave things after hours, but I'll see people digging through the bags and then it's just like, I know people think like donating, like it's just always such a good thing. But it's kind of like the volunteerism thing that I feel like, you know what? I don't think all volunteering is good either, because some of it is kind of, it doesn't help the people that you think you're helping. And I'm just like, a lot of people that I know that so-called volunteer, like in real life, like when it comes to things they could just do on a daily basis, like they're not really doing things just to be friendly to people or like, you know, things that would actually help people. They think because they went and did this one charitable thing like that makes them like have such a contribution. But I don't know, like I just don't think you have to do all those things. Like I think, why don't you just do something in your daily, like if you want to help somebody, I don't know, buy a homeless person a donut or a burrito. You don't need to like brag up and down the street about how you volunteered at this organization. You could buy somebody a meal and do the same thing. You really could, without the accolades. Like people want the accolade. They want that accolade. They want, the recognition, the volunteerism recognition. Like, yeah, I volunteered. And look, I'm not trying to rag on volunteering, but like I have things I want to do in my own life and I can help people in my own way. I don't need to be part of a group to do it. Like I had this discussion with a friend once. She was upset because she wanted to volunteer, but she was mad because the volunteer work that she was doing wasn't what she thought it would be. She goes, they just wanted me to do administrative work at this one place. And I said, well, maybe that's all that they have to do. She goes, but I want to do this. Like she wanted to do this specific thing. And I'm like, well, if you're a volunteer, they're going to have people doing what they need. It might not be as glamorous. Like a lot of volunteers believe that when they're volunteering, they're going to be doing this very glamorous thing. But a lot of times they just need help with paperwork or something that's like clerical. It might not be as glamorous as you think it is. And yeah, you might be helping an organization to some degree, but I think people just have these grandiose ideas. Look, I think like Doctors Without Borders or like medical volunteers, like, yeah, that's actually a truly, truly needed thing. Like those are things like where people go to war-torn countries and they're giving people like food and shelter. Like that's actual real volunteerism. Yes, that is valid 100%. But when I was reading something about volunteerism that kind of just made open my eyes was it was these organizations that would go into certain countries, like especially like third world countries, and they would build houses, and it would turn out that the people who were volunteering didn't have any training in building. So after they left, like the volunteers gave themselves a pat on the back, like, oh, I helped these people. They don't know anything about building. What they built wasn't sustainable, wasn't going to work. So people that lived in that country would have to come fix the problem later. So I don't think like you're really helping anyone if you just go into a country and you're like, oh yeah, I know how to do this. And it sounds all glorious to you. And it's something that you brag to your friends about, when really like people just had to fix the mistake later, you know? So I don't think you need to do grandiose volunteering. If you want to help someone, there are plenty of opportunities in daily life where you could just be a friend to someone, where you could just buy a homeless person a meal if you want to. You don't have to be connected to an organization to do any of these things. And my dad did stuff like that all the time. And I don't know, he never had to tell the general public about it. He didn't have to like say, I'm a volunteer. He just did it because he wanted to. It was something he wanted to do, okay? He wasn't looking for like praise from anyone. He just actually wanted to do that. That's his thing. Like occasionally, if I get a donut, and I really shouldn't get donuts, but if I do, I'll just give one to a homeless person or something. Or I was going to give a homeless person a banana the other day. He didn't want my banana, but you know, things like that. You don't need to like have this grandiose message attached to it. That's where I just don't get into like group dynamic. Like when people need accolades and it has to be attached to a group, I just disagree so highly, so much. Like, why? Why do you need that? I mean, I guess some people really need it. But it's funny, like when the pandemic came, all of a sudden people didn't want to volunteer anymore because, they were worried about the virus. So a lot of volunteerism actually kind of came to an end because of the pandemic. So I don't know. I'm not against volunteerism. I just don't think, I don't know. And I just think back to my one friend, like she told me that my life would be more valid if I was volunteering. But this was the same friend who was complaining that volunteer opportunities weren't as grandiose as she wanted them to be. And I thought, okay, so she's complaining that when she wanted to volunteer somewhere, and she would, I don't know, and she kind of like, I don't ever want to get down on anybody, but she'd be like, oh, like, your hobbies only go so far. So that's where I kind of have came to the opinion, like the other day where I was saying that I want to move in silence because I don't really want to tell people what I'm doing anymore all the time, like in daily life, because a lot of people won't really support you. So I kind of just want to do what I want to do in daily life without like making an announcement about it, because I don't know, personally, I don't need to hear what other people think about what I'm doing. Like, ooh, some lemons left over from last night. Like, I just don't think that's making me feel like good. And I don't think that there was any necessary need to that. But I also learned something. Don't ever complain about something to a friend. Just like they always say, you should talk to people about something. That talk therapy is good. I kind of disagree. I'm going out on a limb here and saying I don't think you need to talk through all your problems. Some people are like, you're going to work out your problems by going to therapy or talking it out. I think sometimes it just makes it worse. Like sometimes you just need to think about something and then let it go and like go on to something more productive. And some people are like, but that's avoidance. But I think it's actually really good. It's a healthier way of dealing with things, in my opinion. Because I just feel like if you're always talking about something that's bothering you, like you just kind of focus on that thing, that one thing. And there's so much more to life than that. So I don't know. Like those are just my opinions on some popular topics. Like I don't think people need to go to therapy. I don't think people have to be volunteers. I think people are always looking for some sort of valid reason to exist. But I think you can find it through just being yourself and having a passion about something and being interested in life and helping people in authentic and legitimate ways that resonate with you. I don't think it needs to be some grandiose thing. You don't have to. And then like when it comes to negative news stories, there's always going to be something negative in the news, but keep this in mind. I'm not like, oh my gosh, everything needs to be positive 24/7. But there are interests in this world that like to keep people down, that like to keep people distracted, that like to keep people feeling anxious, and people are always like, oh, anxiety has increased in our times. And I'm like, I don't know, I guess I would feel that way too if I watched the news all the time, because I read the news a little bit, but like when I start getting that feeling of, well, it changes from day to day, and the news stories aren't that positive, and they're so insular, like all they do is talk about U.S. politics. I'm like, Americans are so up there, waters. Americans are up there, waters, because they think that their elections are the most important thing. Whether you be a Republican or a Democrat, you're up your water. If you just think that our elections are the only thing that people care about. And I think Americans are, I hate to say it, even liberal Americans. I know liberal Americans like to prance around and think, oh, we are so educated, unlike like conservatives. But here's the thing. I'm not a conservative and I'm not a liberal, but I've met conservatives that when they travel abroad, they learn the language and the culture, and they know more about like another culture. They're very sophisticated people. And then you have liberals that will go visit European countries and talk about their election, or have parties like expat parties. I'm like, if you're an expat American, why do you need to have some sort of like campaign event for the president and the embassy. I'm like, you're an expat. You're not even living in the United States. Why don't you go back to the United States and campaign in your country? I always just thought that was weird. Like these celebrity expat campaign fundraising events at an embassy. It just was strange. I'm just like, you're expat. You're not even living in the US. So I'm not questioning your patriotism, but I'm just like, really? What are you doing abroad if like you're just thinking about our elections? Like, why aren't you in America doing something about it? It's weird. You know why? Because you live in a privileged bubble. That's why. But that's just my thoughts on that. I don't even really care that deeply. I'm just like, I do find it funny though and interesting that expats go abroad and they don't really learn the language and culture. And it's liberal people too. There are a lot of liberal people who have traveled abroad, conservatives as well. And I'm a history major. I might have not traveled to certain countries, but I'll ask them like, oh, did you learn about that? They go, I didn't know that about the country I visited. I'm like, but you visited that country. And it's just kind of a basic historical fact about a country that they visited. And they don't know about it. And I'm like, okay. And I don't know. Some people would say things like, well, traveling makes you just so culturally aware. I don't know. I think it's just like people that travel within the United States, like to different cities. And sometimes you just can tell they're tourists. And actually, people can't really travel as much abroad anymore. So, like, they're doing it within the United States. So, you're seeing some of that again. And I grew up in, like, a tourist town where people would just act like they saw a dog in the mountains. And they're like, it's a mountain dog. I mean, I feel like you kind of have to live in a country for an extended amount of time. I would say 1 year, immersing yourself in the culture, not just being like an expat, to actually understand the culture. So, okay, I was kind of thinking about this watching the movie Casablanca, okay? So, you know, it's one thing if you're just kind of like upfront, like, hey, I'm a saloon keeper and my name is Rick and I have like this American bar. But the thing, like, okay, Casablanca seems like all exotic and fun and interesting. But here was the problem about the movie Casablanca, and I'm sure they didn't think about it back then, because Casablanca remains a cosmopolitan city, but you didn't really hear anything about Moroccan culture. You just see people wearing like some of the local garb, but you don't really hear any spoken Arabic. And yes, people speak French in Morocco, but they also speak Arabic. They are Moors. There was nothing about the local culture. It was all just about the Europeans. It was about the American, the French, and the Germans. And like, yeah. But even the movie Allied, because I'm rewatching Allied today too. We're going to do a talk about, or I am, on my channel about like comparing and contrasting these two movies. I mean, I think they try to play a little bit to a more savvy modern audience by including some elements of like Moroccan culture, but you don't really see much of it. Once again, it's all the expat community. And that's fine and all. Like, if you want to be an expat, I don't care. But I kind of always thought, it's interesting. Okay, so a lot of expats, like, they leave their country of origin because, like, I don't know, their heart was broken or they have issues, yada, yada, yada. The list goes down the line. But do they really immerse themselves in the local culture? Like, did Rick learn to speak Arabic? Did he have any interest in the culture of Morocco? No, he was running an American cafe. I'm just like, okay. So this is my, like, just kind of my critique of expat culture. I'm not trying to hate on expats. Like, that's cool if you want to be an expat. But why is it that expats never really learn the language? And that was one thing I really didn't like about that series, Emily in Paris, is that she still can't really speak French after living in Paris for a few months. I'm like, how embarrassing. Like, you work for a French company and you expect everybody to speak to you in English. It's just such laziness. Like, but there are Americans like that. There are liberal Americans like that. There are conservative Americans like that. And we go on the Facebookies, okay, and we act like our election is the most important election. We talk about our election cycle. We go abroad, we're expats, and we're talking about our opinions on Biden and Trump. I'm like, oh man on a stick. What are you doing, buddies? Why are you living abroad if you just need to meet a group of expat friends who can speak your language? Like, didn't you move abroad to learn something about the culture or to immerse yourself in the culture of that country? Or are you just escaping your problems? Like, I kind of, maybe I'm psychoanalyzing expats, but I feel like sometimes people move because they think they can escape their problems in life, like something, like there's a reason. Like, yes, maybe it's travel, but if you're just an expat living in a foreign land and you really haven't immersed yourself in the culture and you're just kind of making friends with expats, I mean, I get it. It's probably easier to be friend expats than people locally, but it just feels kind of weird. Like, why are you living in another country if you really didn't want to know anything about that culture? Like, I've always thought that. And you can't keep me from thinking that. I really do believe that. Like, if you don't even attempt to learn the language, like, it just, like, and I'm not even very linguistically inclined. Like, I know, like, look, when I was watching Casablanca today, I realized that my spoken French is voulez-vous français. It's not the best. Okay. I took 2 years of French. I took 1 year of Spanish. So, I mean, I can speak a little bit of French and Spanish if I have to. Parlez-vous français? I actually have a very high understanding, like an elementary level understanding of spoken and written French. So, like, if people are speaking in French or Spanish to me, I can understand what they're saying. I do to some extent, but I don't ask me to speak either of those languages. But I'm not super linguistically inclined. But if I was going to move to another country and I was going to be living there, I'm just like, when am I making a more of an attempt to speak the language or actually learn something about the culture? So I just never really understand this expat thing. Like, to me, it just feels like, okay, you're escaping your problems. And I'm not saying all expats are like this, but I just feel like the ones, like the whole, and it's definitely true, like with Rick, like he's escaping something in his life. Like, he was always looking for something deeper. And his life was kind of touched by this woman, Elsa, who he met in Paris. And he thought he loved her, but he didn't really love Elsa. I know he thinks he loved Elsa. He loved her so much, he thinks. But they didn't want to ask any questions about each other's past. And Elsa just kind of, like, she loved him because it's like she's a younger woman, like in her 20s. I haven't Googled to figure out her exact age, but she makes a reference in Casablanca, like, where were you 10 years ago? And she tells Rick that, oh, I was getting a brace put on my teeth. And he's like, that's like the most that she tells or reveals to him during the time he's like with her in Paris. But it turns out she had a husband. She thought she loved her husband, Laszlo. She thought she loved him, but it turns out she admired him. And he's just so into his work. But, she does worry about him, but the kind of hot, fiery, lusty love she has is for Rick. Yeah, I'm just like, okay. But it gets into this whole expat thing. Like, okay, so you're abroad, you're going to other countries, you're fighting in the Spanish Civil War, you're doing this and that. Are you just trying to escape your problems? Because obviously I think Rick was, because he always makes references to being from New York, but being slightly disenchanted with his life. I mean, wherever he went, did he really make an attempt to become part of the culture there? No. So I guess that's the thing about. I mean, I don't disagree. Traveling, you can learn about the culture, but I don't feel like traveling really learns about the culture. It's kind of like daytime tourists to a local American city. Because, I know people say, well, Americans don't have culture, but every city has certain ways of life. So visiting a city that day might give you a romantic view of that city, or visiting a European country or African country, you might get a romanticized view of that country. You might learn a few things, but the general traveler isn't really that deeply invested. Like, their investment isn't that deep. Nobody actually wants to move to those countries and learn the language and actually get to be like one of the people there. It's like, to me, I feel like if you were moving abroad, one of the whole point is I want to immerse myself completely in a new culture. I don't want to just make expat friends, because it just seems like, oh, it's kind of, isn't it a little lazy in a way? I don't know. I'm not anti-expat. I don't have completely everything against expat, But I don't know, like Casablanca goes, it kind of makes me think about this topic again, like just how the whole expat community, just like Americans, British, French people living abroad in different countries, like they just don't really learn the language or the culture of those countries that they're living in. And eventually they become repatriated. It's kind of my same argument about the lover. Of course, like we're white French people living in Saigon, really going to learn the Vietnamese language? Of course not. Like they look down upon them. Obviously, that's what that whole review was about. It was just like, I'm living in this country, but I feel superior because I'm white. And yeah, that is, it is a little bit of racism. And not to like, I'm not saying that expats are racist, but at the end of the day, I do feel like it's interesting. Like, do they ever ask themselves, like, why is it that they're living in that other country, but they're not really immersing themselves in the culture? I don't know. Like, it's a question that comes to mind. So I know a lot of people would be like, yeah, you need to go do this and that and live in another country. But at least some people learn the language and they learn the culture, and they seem to know more about the culture than other expats. And I'm not saying that you have to like become one of the culture. That's not realistic. I can understand why expats would make expat friends, but just shows like Emily in Paris, where she doesn't learn the language at all. But just other shows. It's just like the whole expat experience. I guess, like, at the end of the day, I do, if the thing ever goes away, maybe I want to travel if I did have means, but I don't really admire people that lived an expatriate lifestyle if they were just like kind of maintaining relations with people that were not from that country that they're residing in and not really immersing themselves in the culture. It's just kind of like, here I am, but I don't really need to know anything about the local culture. Like, it's just here as a prop. And I'm not even like saying this from a liberal standpoint. I'm just saying this from a common sense standpoint. Are you that ignorant that you just don't want to learn anything about the culture of the country you're living in? I don't know. So I always have these kind of thoughts when I'm doing dishes. And that's what I was thinking about. But thanks for watching.